We're live. Hey guys, welcome to God's Little Acre. Actually, Resistance Chicks. Here's our man, Kansas.
We totally have laundry in the background. Did you mean to do that?
Yeah, it's nice. It's laundry. This is nice. There's
Little
no.
Jack's tidy whities.
You know what? You don't have to. People don't know that until you point it out, right?
We have great news, guys.
We have great news. Oh my gosh! So I am at my grandma Marilyn's, and I'm helping her with computer issues, and she's got on our local news, and I hear, and Trump is set to pardon 2 ranchers, and my neck went wham to the television, and my ear, like my hair started standing up, and I was like waiting, and she's like, the Hammonds, and I was like, I literally stood up like it was a football game. I was like, yeah! And my grandma Marilyn was like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, now I have to explain to you why this is important. Why do we have Kansas here today?
Because here are the facts. Because a lot of people are a little bit confused on the Hammonds and why would Trump pardon them. President Donald Trump on today, just a couple hours
At
ago,
noon.
pardoned 2 Eastern Oregon ranchers serving time in federal prison for setting fire to public land in a case that inflamed their supporters and gave rise to the armed takeover of the Maia National Wildlife Refuge. The decision will free Dwight Hammond Jr., 76, and his son, Stephen Hammond, 49. They were convicted in 2012 of arson on Harney County land where they had grazing rights for their cattle.
Now, wait a minute. I want you to pause right there because you're reading an article, and people that may not be familiar with this story, and this is why we brought Kansas in here. When I heard it on the news, and she says they were convicted of arson and setting fire to land, it makes it sound like they were these rebellious people that just lit a match to a field or to public land just in protest of something.
Right.
What were they really doing?
The facts are, hey guys, everybody's coming. The Hammonds have been pardoned. We're so excited. The Hammonds are a father and a son who had a ranch in Oregon. And in 1997, they kept trying to get a permit so that they could do a controlled burn on their land. And in a second, we're going to have Kansas, who's been part of controlled burns, explain to you what it is and why ranchers do them all the time.
Right.
And they couldn't get their permit, which means they might not have healthy cattle that year.
Right.
So they went ahead and burned on their own property. And unfortunately, that fire butts up against a wildlife refuge, and it burned some acres there, which actually, from what I understand, with these federal lands, they don't take care of them. They just let it go to it's overgrown, it's not taken care of.
They make it sound like it was a public park and the fire spread and children were
Nobody was
burned.
there, and so to say it was arson is ridiculous. Arson is when you purposefully set fire to something.
Yeah.
An accidental fire, like would you say a firework that went up and then traveled to the wildlife refuge, was that arson or was that an accident?
So before you finish, maybe you could let Kansas go ahead and explain.
Well, part of as far as like a globalism thing, like it's on paper, you might think, well, it's kind of okay. You have these areas, these national forests, national parks where people aren't, putting skyscrapers everywhere, and it's more natural. But the problem is that the old way of managing the land, like the Native Americans or the settlers of this country, they're using trees to have campfires for building houses and stuff, and then when they don't have a purging of all the dead material, sometimes it just gets to building up just so much that it's just a kind of a
fire hazard.
Yeah, tinderbox.
Well, when we were in Montana,
kindling that's just ready to go up.
And we were at Glacier, there have been fires since we were there, right? We saw the fires. It's kind of like a nature's process.
And I don't know what is this I'm not sure of the topography of these areas, but
I think
but
it
some
was
of the
flat
places,
fields.
Some of the places out west, I mean, obviously, it seems like in the mountains for some reason things just don't rot like they do. As you head into the more plains state areas.
That makes sense.
It's like
so it would sit there like petrified?
Well, there's like old windmills and stuff from like the early 1900s or something that it's just wood. It's not, treated wood, and it's just kind of still there. And if the stuff isn't breaking down, then it just kind of builds up.
So explain to them why, because you grew up on a cattle ranch, your grandfather owned a ranch, and they put cattle on it, and they did a control burn usually every year. Why would they do that, and what was that like?
Well, I don't know how, Joel Salatin or any of the, you know, modern farmy people, what their stance is on it, but, from what I always heard was that the Native Americans always used to burn, and before there's anybody out here in the United States, I mean, lightning would just strike the earth and then it would just start burning and the old dead grass would just all burn off. But
And like weeds and stuff, right? Invasive species that cows can't
well,
eat.
the benefit is that, I mean, you could argue that maybe you could, bale off the material that's just going to get burnt anyway. I don't know about that, but all I know is that a lot of times, you see in lawns, there's some varieties of fescue or whatever that are just, yeah, the rooster's talking a lot. There are a lot of species in your lawn that just stay green all year, and then there's other lawns that just kind of die off and become brown in the winter.
Yeah.
And it seems like in the prairie, I mean, sometimes if you're driving through a ranch or something, the grass can be higher than the vehicle.
Wow.
Depending on the area.
Wow.
I mean, it's not like, you can't see
When you have like
anything,
thousands
but
of
it's just the
acres, you're like
seed
not going
heads
to be able to
are
mow it,
higher.
right?
What's that?
You have thousands of acres, you're not really going to be able to mow it. It's not really
It
feasible.
depends what your equipment is, but obviously if you're a more natural type person, you want to just put the cows on, put the
There's corn
sheep
behind there, Michelle.
or goats on the land, and just let them do the work of taking down the vegetative material that's being generated.
Right.
But the theory is that, in the springtime, you get all sorts of, over time, if the land's not properly managed, you get all sorts of weeds and brushy stuff and, tree starts.
Noxious weeds and tree starts.
Yeah, like, hedge apples and, birds peck on them or they fall from the trees and they wash down creeks and then, you have little trees just popping up everywhere.
So rather than have to go in with a spade and a pitchfork and literally just take out tree by tree.
If you burn, then the grass is all gone, that high material is gone, and in theory, the carbon or whatever it is
Goes back into the ground.
It just goes straight back down into the soil, and it's literally like you wipe everything off, and it's just perfectly black. It's almost just like bare dirt, and it's down to absolutely nothing. So supposedly the sun gonna hit the soil, warm up the soil. The grass doesn't have anything to compete with. It's like new trees that are trying to grow in a forest where they don't have a lot of light or something. So then the grass can just spring forth. And sometimes, pastures that aren't burnt or don't have some sort of management, you see that they're full of cedar trees and stuff.
Then you should have to go around digging
and
out cedars.
They're just really brushy, and the limbs just extend clear to the ground. So I don't know. I mean, if you're trying to maximize the grazable area of the land that you have, obviously, if you want shade trees, I mean, I'm all for cows and animals having shade trees, but at these bushy trees that just go clear to the ground, they take up all the land. They're just not really feasible. They don't really serve a purpose unless they're kind of a hedgerow along a property line or something.
So what would a burn day look like? How do they contain it?
Well, it has to occur in the early spring, like February or March, when it's really wet. And the start of it is you have someone either on a horse or a four-wheeler with a metal rake, and they basically start a burning kind of like a flake off of a hay bale or something, that of dead grass, and they start it burning. And basically that person, on a very calm day with no wind, they take off down the property line, and then they burn off however much they want, kind of, like lines on a football field, kind of a border going around the property, and you have someone following in a pickup truck with a big water tank, because usually they're places that are in the middle of nowhere, you got a tank in your own water, obviously, so they follow along, and you have someone with a hose putting the fire out as you go. But you start off with the perimeter so that when you burn off the property, then
it doesn't
it doesn't keep going. It just goes to the property line and then just stops.
So obviously, with the Hammonds, they're fire jumped the line, which can feasibly happen when you're working with that kind of thing, and it is dangerous to do.
They usually know what they're doing, and at least where I was, it seemed like all the ranchers were burning, and they were all very close and, you know, communicating with each other, so they knew, you know, this guy's going to burn here and there, and they knew what was going on.
Right.
And, you know, obviously it gets far more complicated if it's an area with, you know, houses and stuff instead of just absolute just wilderness.
Right. So I want to get to
or like, you know, it
People
goes
have
without
questions,
saying,
yeah.
you know, oil wells. You know, you don't want it to look like Kuwait or
But this-
whatever it was.
My point is on the burning. It's something that pretty much all ranchers
when
do.
Saddam Hussein lit all the oil wells in the Gulf War. You know, you don't want it to look
Here,
like
bring it
that.
in, Leah.
So,
But it is something that like pretty much all ranchers did in Kansas. It was just it was just what they did, whether you agree with it or not. It's their management practices, and it worked, right?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't read about what some of the
Other people might do.
Yeah, what if Joel says it's fake news or whatever? I don't know, but they like to clear it out, to start over.
You had
and just
wanted
let
to
the
do it
fresh
on your
grass
farm,
start.
but you couldn't because it was too small.
Well,
Right, because you had an
there's-
overgrown farm, and the only way to get that cleared out was...
I didn't really have any networking. I was way too busy working, and you know there are oil wells around too, and houses. So you know, the risk for me, it just wasn't worth it. So I was just taking them out by hand.
All right, so Stacy says the Hammonds didn't mean to burn the fed lands. It got out of control. No malicious intent. They need to be paid big for the theft of liberty. Now, Chris Holman had said, what does the pardon mean for the future of controlled burns and government overreach?
That's a really good question. So, what we have at stake here is the fact that the federal government under Obama became its own thug force with federal lands. I mean, we saw so many different cases where Obama overreached and took land and just made thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres federal land.
By the way, it's unconstitutional and illegal for the federal government to own land outside of if it needs to be for like a federal property,
Right.
like a government building or whatever.
So what the cusp of this is really crazy because they were arrested, and it was a for the arson that happened in 1996. The trial wasn't until 2012.
Can you imagine living with that kind of fear for so many years?
Well, I think it was like because of Obama they brought it up. Okay, so that trial judge looked at it, and what the state prosecutors wanted to do was convict them on a terror charge, terror and death penalty charge, okay, which had a minimum 5-year sentence, minimum.
Right.
Okay, so the trial judge was like, this was an accident. It was something that all ranchers do. They burn their own property.
Right.
It was their own property, by the way. They owned the property. They didn't, this was their property. And so what she did was she gave the elder one a sentence, and one got 3 months and one got a year. But see, what happened was they were ordered back to prison in 2016 because the government retried their case to an appeals court. And this is what the White House says. The Hammonds are devoted family men, respected contributors to their local community, and have widespread support from their neighbors, local law enforcement, and farmers and ranchers out west, the White House said in a statement. Justice is overdue for Dwight and Stephen Hammond, both of whom are entirely deserving of these grants of executive clemency. They've each actually served, one like a little over 3 years and one like 4 years of this mandatory 5-year sentence that they should never have been tried under. Okay? An arson charge maybe, but they weren't charged under a plain old regular arson charge.
Because they couldn't have gotten it. They wouldn't have been able to stick.
Right. Susie Hammond, the wife of the elder Hammond, believed her husband and son had a strong case for clemency, but was reluctant to get her hopes up. She says, "I've just been sitting here on the phone since. I still can't believe it. I won't believe it until I see him." Walden says he looks forward to welcoming the Hammonds back to Oregon. Today is a win for justice and an acknowledgement of our unique way of life in the high desert rural West. He said, I applaud President Trump for thoroughly reviewing the facts of this case, rightly determined Hammonds were treated unfairly, and taking action to correct this injustice. Trump's move marks yet another big victory for the backers of the Hammonds, including Ammon Bundy and his followers, who repeatedly cited the case as a trigger for the 41-day occupation of the wildlife refuge that abuts the Hammond family ranch. Bundy viewed the case as an example of the federal government run amok, and a jury acquitted him and the other key takeover figures of all federal charges because the federal government, you'll know, the boy Finicum was shot dead. That whole case, we've covered it. We really don't have time to go into that. With the Bundys taking over the wildlife refuge, saying we've had enough of what you've done. The Bundys had been persecuted by the government for years. They're supposed to have these agreements because the government's like, okay, we're going to take this land. We're not going to let anybody own it. But we realize ranchers, and it's good management to have cattle on the land. So we're going to give you some permits.
Right.
And then they would deny the permits or they charge too much for the permits. And the federal government should not own the land. They own like 80% of the West. It's absolutely insane.
Well, but since you did bring up Lavoy Finicum, what I kept thinking is I'm so excited about the Hammonds, but there is somebody that you can't pardon someone's death.
Right.
And that's what's really unfortunate when the government overreaches so much that they actually kill somebody.
Right.
Like they did with Lavoy Finicum. Jeanette's not going to get a pardon, but I think Trump has already kind of given her a nod.
So here's how the Hammonds, it worked out. The Hammonds were convicted of setting a fire in 2001, and the son was convicted of setting a second fire in 2006. A federal judge initially sentenced the father to 3 months in prison and the son to 1 year after they successfully argued that the 5-year mandatory minimum was unconstitutional. Then they served their time and were out of prison when prosecutors challenged the shorter terms before the Ninth Circuit Court, and the appeals won, and another federal judge in 2015 sent the ranchers back to complete these full sentences. And that is when Trump said, this is an overzealous appeal. It was unjust. Of course, the Oregon attorneys who fought the case think it's just stupid and blah, blah, blah. As for this month, Dwight Hammond has served 2 years and 9 months in prison and 31 months of supervised release. Wow. His son has served 3 years and 4 months in prison and 2 years of supervised release. I am very happy for the entire Hammond family, who I have known and respected for 25 years, said their attorney. He was trying to reach the Hammonds by phone today. I hope that Dwight and Stephen will soon be able to continue their work on the Hammond Ranch. This came out of nowhere. You were just listening to it on our local news.
I literally stopped what I was doing, and I called Leah. I had goosebumps all over. And I said, Trump is getting ready to pardon the Hammonds. And she's like, huh? Because I never get the jump on Leah with the news, and I just so happened to today. And she didn't even believe me. I said, it was on Local 12. She's like, I'm going to have to look it up before I believe you.
So, unlike some cases where clemency may outrage the community, this clemency will be embraced by everybody in the community who just loves them. These lengthy sentences, plus the U.S. Bureau of Land Management's refusal in 2012 to renew their grazing permit, has crippled them. They actually had $400,000 in fees they had to pay, and they have paid. And so if the Hammonds aren't able to return to the ranch in the near future, the legacy of their family that they've been building will be lost. So they're hoping that this will work out. Dwight Hammond set a prescribed burn on 300 acres of his own land, and then it traveled an additional 139 acres, his lawyer wrote. The elder Hammond said he was trying to fend off invasive species. The prosecutors, what I've been seeing on Twitter, is they said it was also used to cover illegal deer poaching that got out of control. But I really doubt that. I feel like that was really stupid. They paid $400,000 in 2015 to settle a civil suit brought by the government. And, they're having a hard time sustaining their cattle operation. The government really wants to shut down. They've been outspoken. Go ahead.
Well, and it's somewhat controversial today, too, because there's a big movement to ban controlled burning and say that they're not allowed to do it anymore because of the smoke, and it's going to destroy the atmosphere and, pollute the environment and everything.
So tell that to God when the lightning and stuff like that hits Glacier and it all goes up in smoke.
For real.
So yeah, Chris Holman keeps asking about that. Chris, I don't know what the future for controlled burns will be. I think it depends on Trump being in office. I really think it kind of hinges on that. Whether, I think Stacey said in the chat, Trump gets big points for this. And so yesterday, and we're going to cover this, I think, later today. We're going to go live again, possibly, about the justice appointment. So Trump appoints somebody that we're not exactly pleased with. The very next day, Trump plays games, I got to tell you. He knows what he's doing. The very next day, he comes out and he pardons the Hammonds, which he knows is going to earn him big points with all of us and with all of you guys.
So far, Trump has pardoned Dinesh D'Souza, just to get that off his record, because he couldn't even vote. Okay? He's pardoned Lewis, who's that, Libby Jr., a former aide of Vice President Dick Cheney. I don't really know much about that. I don't remember Scooter Libby or whatever. Sheriff Aparo, and then Alice Johnson for the black lady. So I'm actually really, really excited about this. Thomas Massey says Trump pardons ranchers who were unjustly sentenced for mandatory minimums and overzealous prosecutions. Great news. Congress should fix the bad law now.
That's really awesome. So that kind of answers your question. Not that it's going to happen, but people are aware of the fact that it is a bad law and it needs to be addressed.
Franklin Graham says, thank you, POTUS, for carrying out justice and pardoning Oregon ranchers Dwight and Stephen Hammond. Many ranchers in the West have suffered under the heavy hand of the federal government. These men are great patriots. Thank you for doing what is right.
Oh my gosh.
So all the Christians who know these men, they know their story. We've had to deal with government. You know, when government is breaching their contract with you as a human being, then there are steps that you need to take. And I'm not going to tell everybody to go and you know, take over federal land or whatever. But what's interesting is you see here the hypocrisy, where you have people on the left, the liberals, are shutting down ICE buildings, and they're staying there for a while, and then the police have kind of maybe arrested some. But I haven't seen anybody be put in jail for longer than like you're in and you're out, right?
Right.
And they're doing it. They're shutting down highways. If right wing people shut down a highway, they're going to prison for life. You know what I mean? If you and I go concealed carry and shut down a highway, we're going to jail for a long time. But they just shut down a highway the other day in protest for ICE. They're trying to shut down ICE buildings. So what's the difference here between the Hammond supporters at the wildlife refuge weren't taking it over, they were just not leaving it, they're just setting up camp there, just kind of hanging out, right? What's the difference between that and people on the border protesting ICE, setting up camp there, setting up camp in front of these ICE buildings? And they're seen as heroes of the left.
Sure.
And the police are seen as these horrible big bad guys when finally they kick them out because ICE has to get into their buildings. Ain't nobody need to be in that stupid wildlife refuge. They weren't stopping anybody from getting to work or doing anything. You gotta just ignore them. I just hang out in the wildlife refuge, okay, do your thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But it was on purpose. They chose to make a show out of these people, and then they chose to murder somebody.
What about Standing Rock or whatever? They let those people stay there forever. Forever they let those people stay there.
Right.
You know, and they finally left us a pile of junk and craziness, and you know, the government has done horrible, awful things, and it's getting out of control.
Right.
So, do you have any answers for government out of control, federal government out of control, Maddie?
Shut it down. I'm just kidding. But you do need to shut down these out of control rogue government agencies that are carrying out these orders. The FBI, the CIA.
Right.
This was not local law enforcement that shot Lavoy Finicum.
Well, I'm so excited. I'm excited about the Bundys because in that particular case, the federal judge got an FBI informant who blew the whistle and said they're putting up pictures of them, they're making fun of the Bundys, they have a hit list on the Bundys, and they're hiding evidence, they're planting evidence,
right.
They're lying, they've got cameras, and so when the judge had to throw out the case because it was not it was a hit job.
So I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that this particular situation gives me hope.
Yeah, I'm excited.
The fact that Trump, regardless of what you think about him, is listening to his base. And when I say base, I don't even mean the people that sit at home and watch Fox News. I mean the base. The people that watch Alex Jones, the people that watch Resistance Chicks, the people that know what is going on. Red-pilled people Trump is listening to them, and he is very aware. And so I kind of feel like this
I think
pardon,
he was aware
while
before
it
he
is
became president.
yes, while this pardon is for the Hammonds, and I don't want to take that away at all, it absolutely is for the Hammonds. As an aside, it also, like a cherry on top, is Trump's way of saying, guys, I'm listening.
What I'm so excited
I know what's going on.
about Trump is that as a president, instead of enacting restrictions and enacting laws, he's coming in here and just being like, okay, that's stupid, that's stupid, that's
Too much
stupid, that's
regulation.
stupid, that's stupid, that was bad, that was bad. He's undoing all these bad things, which
Right.
our federal government is supposed to be small. So if a president comes in, you would think a power tripping president
would be putting all these restraints.
would
like
be
Obama
making
did.
Obamacare and you know, trying to push all these crazy things.
Forcing Americans to do things that they don't want to do.
Exactly. And so we've got this president right now who's undoing things, and people are upset because I've heard people on left say he's just undoing things. He's actually not doing anything. But that's what our founding fathers would have done. Okay, if Thomas Jefferson were president, what in the world do you think he'd be doing?
Well, he was a farmer to start out with, and anyone that's bought a farm or some sort of ranch property out in the middle of nowhere knows that when you buy it, you don't really know what is out there.
True.
And a lot of times, until you burn off the land, you can't cleanse it out because you don't want to just throw animals out there if there's random. I mean, it's amazing what appears when you burn it off because there's random old rusty, mangled up sheet metal and that really heavy woven wire fencing that they used to use that's super heavy.
Could be dangerous, you're
Could
saying.
be dangerous for your animals.
Yeah, there's like old broken down farm implements and, you know, old pop cans or who knows what out there. And it's good to cleanse and clean off the earth from all this stuff, take it to the recycle place, or if it's some sort of farm implement they can use and
Right.
fix it up and use it.
So that's as an aside. Up in our corner, we've got these 2 wagon wheels that you found on your ranch, right?
Yep, they were buried. Just like a friend of ours is cleaning up an area at his kind of homestead, you know, out of the city limits, and he found an old farm implement.
Yeah,
But-
Tim did.
It was a horse-drawn mower, right?
A horse-drawn
Yeah.
mower. But your wagon wheels, that would have been, we were reminiscing on what those would be. Those are people like going out west and then they just happen to stop in Kansas and right there on your ranch and their thing broke down and it's out there to die.
This would have been just a little bit after that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I always figured that some of the graves at the cemetery out there by the ranch, they had to have been just people out on the trail going west because, I mean, it's some of them, it's literally just a rock with, you know, just a name scratched on it. Like, they just throw them in the ground and keep going.
Or the wagon was abandoned somehow. It was just like in the middle of a field. So like,
Did we upload any of the videos that we took when we went out to your ranch onto
I don't know.
Mass Faith 3? If we did, I will try to find them and link to those in the description so you guys can get a little bit of a visual of what we're talking about, the ranch that Kansas grew up on out there. Because we got to go out there in 2016 and see it for ourselves, which was really awesome.
so I don't want to get any deeper, but we would talk about land and everybody needs to find land, but you need to find the land that you're called to be on.
Right.
That particular land, you guys might feel bad. Well, Kansas, why aren't you on that ranch? Well, because it wasn't gotten right.
Well, they were bankers back in the Great Depression. So basically, you know, they're, I'd say, part of like the globalist
The
agenda.
Rockefellers kind of
Yeah, they're
people.
kind of like mini Rockefellers or something.
Yeah.
So, you know, everyone was losing their farms. And, well, if you're the banker, if you have the ability to
Foreclose, right?
to swing it, then you buy everything on pennies on the dollar. So, you're like, yeah, I'll pick up this farm here and this ranch here. And, you know, then,
Your family kicked the family off the farm. It's really sad.
yeah, there's an old guy that I never met him, but he grew up there, and there's a house there on the property that was long gone by the time I was there. But you know,
Didn't he come and visit the ranch and be like reminisce
well,
about it?
well, he was really old. He's an old man, and you know, I guess someone in my family hired him back on to sort of manage the place
That's
or kind of
depressing.
take care
Isn't
of
that
it.
hurt you?
But you know, obviously,
so
I mean,
depressing.
it's a difference between like owning your own business and just doing that.
Right.
Kind of like any of the guys on dirty jobs or something, you know, or the the guys that empty our septic tank. They own the business. They do their own thing, and it's just kind of different. If you're the guy that owns it versus you're just the peon that just kind of works there and puts a silly hat on with somebody's logo on it. You know what I mean? It's just not the same. And he, I guess, died in just a horrible nursing home there in this little town.
God punished your family for it didn't sell for very much money.
Well, yeah, it was like a 1.5 mile square, and it sold for pennies on the dollar. You couldn't get 5 acres.
Because there was an auction in the winter.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact figure, but you probably couldn't buy 5 or 10 acres of a house for what it sold for. It sold for pennies on the dollar. Because, the whole thing was just this fire sale where they just had the noxious weeds coming in, and it's, chaos, we gotta cash in now. And they wanted to sell, and I said, well, goats eat these plants, why don't you just put goats out there and intensively graze them? But they sold it, and it was the worst ice and snowstorm in 5 or 10 years.
That's what I call the wrath of God.
On the day that it sold, no reserve on the auction. Most people...
Who does that?
Most people wouldn't sell an old rusty bicycle on eBay without putting in a reserve on the auction. This big, massive ranch, okay, we'll sell it for 10 cents.
Well, you've worked through that because you wanted to grow up to be a rancher and stay on that, but then you realized it wasn't yours to begin with. And so you have to find, your land that God...
traveling over there.
Sorry. You need to find the land that God has called you to be on. And when you do, then you stick to it and you don't let go of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, because this is our property. Has been our family since the 30s. And they keep encroaching on us, keep telling us we can't farm on it. And we've got law on our side, praise God.
Yep.
Right? We've had to fight the township and the county and our neighbors, and we're doing what we're doing. And sometimes you got to fight. And it makes you feel good, though, when you fight and you win. And
that's what's so exciting about this particular situation.
Exactly.
So I want you guys to take this for the rest of the day. Be super duper excited. When we come back later today, Lord willing, we will bring you what is going on in Brexit, the chaos there, and we will bring you the latest... justice appointment, the Supreme Court justice appointment, and I call it disappointment, but that's all right.
So we want to thank Kansas for being with us to give us a little bit of a rancher's.
And thank Kansas for working on all the cars lately because they're all falling apart at once, and he's